Go. Good day and welcome to Agenda. Sitting in for Cito Beltran, I'm Danie Laurel. You're watching One News, all sides, all the time. Now today's starter quote is from author Liza Terkhurst. We cannot enable bad behavior and call it love. Now let's take a quick look at the front page of the Philippine Star. The results of the 2022 Program for International Student Assessment, or the PISA, is out, and the Philippines remains in the bottom 10. After ranking the lowest out of 79 countries in 2018, the Philippines ranked 76th out of 81 countries in 2022. The Department of Education is holding a national forum today to address the performance of the Filipino students in this said assessment. In a joint manifesto, the supermajority in the House of Representatives said they have formed a united front to support President Bongbong Marcos' initiative for fresh peace negotiations to end decades-long communist insurgency. This after Vice President Sara Duterte appealed to Marcos, describing the resumption of peace talks as a, quote, agreement with the devil. The manifesto represents 280 members of the 311-strong lower chamber. Inflation slows further to 4.1% in the month of November, reaching its lowest level in 20 months. The Philippine Statistics Authority attributed this to slower increases in food prices. We will discuss the matter more with esteemed economists later in the program. The Armed Forces of the Philippines Chief General Romeo Browner Jr. said there is no need to declare martial law after the bombing in Mindanao State University in Marawi City. Browner said authorities are on top of the situation and are now looking at the two persons of interest. 4 were killed in the bombing that took place last weekend. Meanwhile, around 3,800 budding lawyers passed this year's bar exam. How hard was it to study for that hardest licensure exam in this country? We're going to speak with one of this year's top-notchers. But first, let's watch this.
Lady Justice welcomed a new batch of lawyers yesterday. Only 3,812 or 36.77% of bar exam takers this year passed what is said to be one of the hardest licensure exams in the country. This is lower than last year's passing rate of 43.47%. Ateneo de Manila University was the top performing law school in this year's bar. It is followed by San Beda University, University of San Carlos, University of the Philippines, and the University of Santo Tomas. President Bongbong Marcos congratulated the country's new lawyers and urged them to uphold integrity and remain united in ensuring every Filipino has access to a fair and equitable justice system. Let's further discuss this on today's agenda.
Pio Buencamino is one of this year's bar exam's top-notchers, ranking 8th out of over 3,800 successful bar exam takers. He is also a registered nurse in the Philippines and the US. Buencamino is a cum laude graduate at UST Faculty of Civil Law, and he is currently working as a legal assistant at the law firm Divina Law. Ephraim Bie leads this year's new crop of lawyers with a top grade of 89.2625%. He is the 5th bar top-notcher from the University of Santo Tomas. He is currently working as an underbar associate at Divina Law.
All right, joining us today, we've got bar top-notcher Pio Buencamino, and of course, we've got Attorney Ephraim. Good morning, Attorney Pio and Attorney Ephraim. Congratulations, both of you. What an amazing feat, guys. Ano muna yung reaction ninyo when you found out you were this year's best of the best in the country in the law profession, at least this year? Let's start with you, Attorney Pio.
Surprised. Yes.
Hi, good morning, Danny. When I first discovered that I placed top 8 in the bar examinations, I was very delighted. I was with my girlfriend. Nagtatalon po ako, Ma'am Dani, because we did not expect that I would go so far because my preparation
Talaga
was
ba?
not good. Di ako confident sa answers ko. But here we are.
All right, here we are. Okay, Attorney Ephraim, what's your nickname? Do we call you Ephraim? Meron bang shorter name dyan?
My friends actually call me F, but
Okay.
Ephraim is okay.
All right, Attorney Ephraim, top one. Okay, you're just the fifth from UST that's ever placed top one. That must be a big deal. Was this in any way your goal? Was this expected in any way? Are you grateful? Are you just surprised? Give us your reaction.
Of course, the goal always as a UST student is to bring pride to our university. So, of course, the goal was always back at the back of my mind. But when I saw that I was the top one, I was actually surprised. Uh, because I wasn't even expecting to pass. I was bracing myself that I would fail the bar exam because I was not so sure of my answers. But I'm actually just really thankful for having the opportunity to pass the bar and to
That's so funny, no? You're both saying you're both surprised. So it's not as if, okay, you study for the bar, and you're sure you're going to get at least you're sure you're going to pass, diba? I mean, for all of these 4 years at least or 5 years of study, you're thinking, sana naman papasa ako. What makes this situation so unpredictable? Can you give, the karaniwang tao an idea of bakit ba, no matter how smart you are, I think one of you is valedictorian, cum laude, di ba? Parang shouldn't it follow that you would pass something if you studied correctly? Why is it that people can still fail the bar? Attorney Pio.
Perhaps one of the reasons that I can think of is because the study of law is minimum 4 years. However, the way I see it, in my experience, it's so compressed that there are lots of provisions that have to be studied, and there are a lot of cases to be studied. And sometimes, if you're not an academic genius, it may take a long time, perhaps more than 4 years. So you may not be able to cover all the cases and the provisions that will be asked in the bar.
So mainly, it's a matter of time. If you have more time to study ba, I don't know, 10 years, would it matter? Would you have a higher passing rate ba? Ganun ba?
Probably it may help. However, yung kaba, yung mismong preparation for the bar season after you graduate, it's really hard.
Okay, Attorney Ephraim, can you add to that, no? I mean, how different do you think? Did you study differently? That's why you topped the bar? Did you have specific, I don't know, tips from other people that you believe helped you do this well? Or is it chamba lang ba yan? Or did you have more time to study? I don't know, what is this distinguishing factor?
For the first question, adding to what Pio said, taking the bar exam involves a lot of moving parts kasi. Hindi lang siya as simple as knowing the law. Sometimes you studied everything but you failed to read one case, and that's the exact case that gets to be
Comes
asked
out.
during the bar. So if that's what happens, that's just pure bad luck. Even if you studied your heart out, when something like that happens and things like that add up, that could spell pass or fail in the bar exam. So it helps to be studious, to be hardworking, but there's a certain there's a certain element of luck that needs to go into taking the bar exam for you to pass or even excel at it. As to my preparations for the bar exam, it was fairly normal naman. I just set a schedule for myself.
Okay.
Since we had contracted bar exam review period of only 3 months, I had to schedule my studying in such a way that I would be able to read all the subject matter in the span of 3 months. So I just stuck to that schedule, and I tried to read as much as I can, and just happy that I got to pass the bar right now.
question, does, placement in the bar matter? Of course, it matters when you get your first job, no? And you can have this as your badge of honor the rest of your life. But does it matter in the legal profession in terms of you becoming a better lawyer? Does it determine something na parang, okay, magaling siya nung bar exam, so talagang magiging top lawyer yan. Of course, as I mentioned, 5 UST, you've got chief justices among this. Is that already predetermining your future?
I think it's not predeterminative, but it's an indication of future success in the legal profession.
All right, let's talk about your backgrounds, no? Pio, attorney, you were a nurse, a registered nurse. What made you think of dropping, or I don't know if you're going to drop completely the medical profession and then turn to the legal profession? And meron bang similarities or synergies in what you've studied before that you can take into this legal profession? Are you going to be a legal profession in the medical field, for example?
Ma'am Danie, I was supposed to pursue medicine because my late father was a doctor and my mother was a nurse.
Okay.
So they told me, why not try medicine? And it was not forced naman. So my pre-med was nurse because my mother was a nurse.
Okay.
However, during my nursing studies, we were required to go into the hospital and perform the duties of a nurse. I realized then and there in the hospital that this was not my life. I did not feel comfortable there. I didn't see myself working as a nurse or a doctor in the hospital. So when I graduated in nursing, I pursued business.
So may business ka pa in between the law school.
Right now, wala naman po.
Wow, okay.
Wala naman.
So nursing to law school. Go ahead.
One more factor was because I enjoyed reading books, non-fiction, though personal development books. So I
Okay.
enjoyed reading books. My father witnessed it. So when he saw that, he told me, why not try law? Because you loved reading. Because my father was a believer in higher education.
Correct.
So I said, why not? Then, if there are Saturday classes only, so I could continue my business, then better.
Okay.
Then, little did I know that law school and perhaps law school and law was a very jealous mistress. And it required lots of time. And I had to be dedicated. Yun. As
Okay.
for the similarities in nursing, the law was not much discussed in nursing. We just had the discussion and konti lang yung laws na na-discuss. However, one thing that I would like to point out is that while nursing is not a common pre-law, I owe my success in law school and placing in the bar to how I was taught in nursing school. Because I was taught to be prepared, anticipate the next step, especially in surgery. As nurses, we had to know what was the surgeon doing and what was he going to do next. So we could prepare the next instrument so that
Correct.
when the surgeon gets to that step, we would immediately hand it over. One more thing was to spot the issue. In nursing, I just want to share it, just to bring honor to the nursing profession and nursing school, is that the questions in nursing are framed in the same way as in law.
Okay.
It's a paragraph. It's a case.
Okay.
It would introduce a patient.
Galing.
It would introduce various symptoms. And it will ask for the proper intervention.
Okay. Galing.
Then, it's a multiple choice question. There are four possible answers. All of them might be answers. All of them will help the patient. However, we have to choose the best
best.
answer which is responsive to the question.
Amazing.
And that's a key in answering the questions in law school and in the bar exam. That's what I carried over. That's why I had an easier transition in law school.
Sayang naman, the loss of the medical profession. Sabi lang, we trained you, tapos biglang alis ka pala. But anyway, it is of course the gain of justice, no, to have you on our side. But like you mentioned, that helped you. Attorney Ephraim, you naman are in the same. We're in the media profession. You are a journalist, and ipa-plug ko na rin. We have two of our producers on our show that just passed the bar as well. While studying full-time, nagbo-broadcast sila umaga, tapos gabi mag-aaral, weekends mag-aaral. I mean, give us an idea, no? For me, for us, it's a very close line between journalism and law, but not everyone would choose to pursue this. Why do that instead of, I don't know, a master's in journalism? And are you planning to completely shift professions now?
In journalism kasi we're taught to be communicators. So that's an important skill which you can use in law school and in legal practice. Because it's one thing to actually know the substance of the law, and it's another thing to communicate that substance to another person.
Interesting,
Or in the case
yeah.
of the bar exam, to communicate that legal basis to
Oo.
the examiner. So that foundation was instilled in me in journalism school. I was actually also a working student while
Wow.
during law school. And I was a news writer as well. So
Grabe.
I carried over that work ethic in law school, and it paid dividends for me.
Idol. Well, hopefully you can continue to write. If it's going to be about law, then you can continue both professions. No, let's talk about the bar as an exam specifically. No, how has it evolved over time? I'm just getting these reports that during COVID it was very different, and then you've got these things like how do you study now? Considering there's AI, considering there's digitalization, is it still the typical law books? Is it still the same way even if you have laptops already? And has it become harder? Or let's say easier, although the passing rate is lower than last year, no? So give us an idea of the evolution of this specific exam. Attorney Pio.
Dani, ngayon po kasi, as we all know, the bar exams is conducted now electronically. We use the Exemplify. From previous years, handwritten. So I think it's a big help to everyone because we didn't have to have a great handwriting, because if it was a handwritten and the examiners would not be able to understand our handwriting, then most probably they wouldn't read it anymore and we'd get a 0. That's at least -5. Ganun po kahirap. And then,
Wow.
and when it's handwritten, there are limited pages in the booklet. So when we had to make erasures, so when we answer, we had to be very precise. Because maubusan kami ng booklet.
Okay.
So we would not be able to answer the other questions. Now, since it is on a laptop, on Exemplify, we could freely type and delete and amend our answers without any penalties or repercussions. So I think it's a big help.
Okay, Attorney Ephraim, no, give us an idea. Of course, you're happy to be top 1 and there's a ranking that goes with it. But some are pushing to just make the exam pass or fail para wala nang grade. Kasi at the end of the day, knowledge of law ba or not? Are you in favor of this?
I think I don't have a hard stance insofar as pass or fail is concerned. I think I need to study it further in order to have a better understanding of the issue. But having the top 20 or top 10 list has its merits, and having a pass or fail system also has its merits.
Whatever should bring us the better lawyers, no? Is the answer to that question. Okay, well, stay tuned. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be discussing the day's agenda after the break. Keep it here on When News. All sides, all the time. Welcome back to Agenda. Sitting in for Cito Beltran, I'm Danie Laurel. We're still here with Ephraim Bie and Pio Buencamino, two of the best performers in the latest legal bar exams. All right, I have so many questions pa about both of you in particular, but let's talk about specific issues of the day. No? Of course, you're not just doing this legal profession just because you love to study, but you do want to make a difference. So we are actually going to flash on the screen here some pressing issues, and I want to get your opinions. No? So our first pressing issue, especially as journalists, is the calls for decriminalizing libel, right? So you have this issue here where in our situation, can you compare our situation here in the Philippines compared to other countries? Some are saying that because libel is a crime, we don't have the same rights to freedom of speech. We are scared to write something, to speak our minds, because we could literally be put in jail. Give us your stance on that. Attorney F, let's start with you.
For decriminalizing libel, I believe in the saying that free speech does not necessarily mean freedom from consequences of speech. So, insofar as the libel law is concerned, it does not punish mere speech, but
Okay.
it punishes speech which is damaging to another person.
Okay, so no need to decriminalize libel for you, Attorney Pio. Are our current libel laws sufficient? Is there some revisions that need to be done?
For me, we don't have to decriminalize libel because there are enough safeguards
Okay.
in the law. And I'd like to add to what Attorney Ephraim said. No right is absolute. So we still need to be mindful of what we say.
Okay, comparing lang to quickly, no? Comparing to other countries, especially democratic countries, gaano kahigpit ba yung ating libel laws? Tama lang ba? Go ahead, Attorney F.
Our libel laws in the Philippines, uh, similar to other criminal laws in the Philippines, is actually the proof required is proof beyond reasonable doubt. So you actually have to prove certain elements of the crime before one can be convicted of libel in the Philippines. So insofar as mahigpit ba sa Pilipinas, you can't just be jailed for libel on the mere say-so of another person.
Okay.
Malice has to be proven. It has to be proven that it was not said for a proper purpose. So there has to be certain elements that have to be proven before one can be convicted of libel.
Okay, so the mismong laws are not necessarily lacking. It's just the actual implementation of the law. No, there needs to be proof beyond reasonable doubt. Second issue, the International Criminal Court investigation into the former administration or former president's drug war. You've got two committees of the House of Representatives already approving, consolidating resolutions, encouraging BBM to allow the Philippines to, let's say, rejoin the ICC or at least cooperate in this investigation or the probe. Your stance on that, Attorney F?
First of all, our involvement in so far as the ICC investigation is concerned, is actually a political question, which is properly addressed to the executive branch of our department. So we should defer to the wisdom of the executive department on this matter, insofar as our involvement in the ICC is concerned.
Attorney Pio, you want to add to that? Does it make our justice system more transparent? Does it show that we are, willing to cooperate and nothing to hide, as what they're saying in this resolution?
I say we allow the ICC to investigate because we have a commitment when we first joined there. And what happened during the time when when we did not yet withdraw from the ICC, is still under the jurisdiction of the ICC. So I say we still let them investigate.
Follow-up question lang on that, no? They're saying, the ones that are against the ICC, particularly VP Sara, is saying that this is undermining our sovereignty as a legal system if you let somebody else, at least come in to play. Your thoughts on that, Attorney Pio?
From what I know, it does not necessarily undermine our sovereignty because to an extent we can allow some what how can I say how do I call that? Parang when we give up some part of our sovereignty, there are benefits to that. So as Attorney Ephraim said, however, it is addressed to the discretion of the president. It is in his wisdom that will determine if it will be beneficial for the Philippines to rejoin the ICC.
Okay, so political question, no? Rather than, again, it's not just a legal question, it's politically motivated. Let's move on to another hot topic of the day, divorce. No, you have an Octa survey saying 51% of Filipinos are actually anti or not pro-divorce. Is the annulment law, or let's say relaxing the annulment law as some have been doing, is that sufficient to replace a divorce law that the rest of the world, except for the Philippines, has? Is that enough protection, particularly for women and children? Attorney F.
Insofar as the protection is concerned, first of all, we have to recognize the background, our cultural background as Filipinos. For the protection, that's being provided by the current annulment law to, for example, to women and children in marriages that are actually failing. We can say that it needs some tweaking or maybe some changes. But insofar as the divorce law is concerned, I think we need to study it more. Insofar as who will be benefited or how will it be implemented or what are the limits as to how it will be implemented. But I don't really have a hard stance on this. But maybe upon further examination or studies of the facts, then maybe I could make a more informed decision about it.
Okay, Attorney Pio, no, you've got a lot of people, I mean, just anecdotally saying that annulments cost an arm and a leg, and then it makes people stuck in relationships, particularly women get stuck in abusive relationships, those without economic capacity to leave their husbands. Yan yung nadadali dito pag walang divorce. Give us your thoughts on that, and also maybe nuance here the separation of the church and the state, diba, in legal matters, where you still have, like you mentioned, a cultural issue, you still have marriages that are based on the Catholic Church.
Ma'am Dani, divorce is a very contentious issue here in the Philippines. So I do not have a hard stance on that. But from a legal standpoint, we have to differentiate we need to point out that in the separation of the church and the state, it is still the government that the marriage in the church is different from the marriage as a law. So while the church while the stance of the church is against it, the government is free to enact a divorce law. Then, another thing that I would like to point out, Ma'am Dani, is that annulment and divorce are different.
Correct.
In annulment, we consider circumstances before and during the marriage, at the celebration of the marriage, before and after the celebration of the marriage. However, in divorce, usually, we can consider those circumstances that occurred during the marriage. So it's very different.
Okay.
And yeah.
So for now, no hard stances kayong dalawa.
But
okay, but clear distinction between an annulment situation and a divorce situation. No? I mean, very, very clear legal distinctions for that. So we still don't have the divorce law. Okay, now we just have a few minutes, but I wanted to ask you both, ano na ba pa yung plano ninyo? And give us an idea of what you were doing right before the bar. As I understand, Attorney F, you were legal assistant, tama ba? In Divina Law. So you're both colleagues na pala. Tama ba? Until now, are you still staying in that law firm, or are you moving? What are your plans, and what type of law are you planning to do? What's your biggest advocacy that you are gunning for? And we're gonna show you this newscast by the time you're already senior lawyer saying yan yung sinabi mo ang gagawin mo. Okay, Attorney F.
You're correct, Danny. No, we're actually underbar associates for Divina Law. Insofar as our current plans is concerned, insofar as I'm concerned, I think I want to gain as much legal experience, as much legal expertise I could get, especially working here at Divina Law with the best lawyers in the country.
And what's your biggest advocacy or type of law that you want to practice?
Right now, I don't have a certain specification or specialization in terms of the type of law I want to practice. But I'm actually in the litigation department of our firm.
Ayan, so free for all pa si top-notcher ng board, whether corporate or environmental or criminal. Okay, so free for all ka pa. Let's talk about, let's go to Attorney Pio. Is there a specific drive that brought you here to the legal profession that you want to fight for, and advocacy that you feel very strongly about?
As of now, Ma'am Dani, I'm just focused on what I have a similar situation with Attorney F. I just want to focus on gaining as much experience as possible. And I would like to say that I am the corporate division of Divina Law, and that they took a chance at me when they hired me. So right now as well, I would like to give back. I would like to give back by showing my loyalty to them right now.
Aba, narinig nyo yan, ha? Alright, so last question na talaga, what is your advice to those that didn't make it, which is actually the majority of those that just like you studied 5 years for this, didn't make it? I'm sure it's very discouraging for them. Meron bang remedy dyan? And ano yung masasabi ninyo to encourage them to continue the legal profession, hopefully? Attorney F, let's start with you.
I would advise them to rest but don't quit. Just remember your motivations. Remember why you started or why you decided to study law in the first place. So while there might be a temporary setback right now, hard work always pays off at the end.
Okay, Attorney Pio, your last words for those that didn't make it, and maybe some tips for their next shot at the bar.
Right now, the advice that I can give to them is that we should remember that we are exactly at the right place at the right time. I don't want to sound insensitive, but we have to trust the plans of God. And for next bar, I would like to share what Padre Pio said, which was shared by my co-underbar, to pray, hope, and don't worry.
All right, and baka nga like you mentioned, this is just one step in their process, no? It's probably taught them already how to study and the type of questions that they are going to be asked. So it's probably a positive thing, or at least hopefully something positive that's going to drive them towards their goals. Maraming salamat, and once again, congratulations. We sincerely hope that you will use this very prestigious and very big moral and ethical responsibility to improve the justice system here in the country. Attorneys and bar top-notchers, we've got with us Ephraim Bie and Pio Buencamino. Thank you for joining us today.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
We will take a short break. Keep it here on Agenda.
Filipino consumers enjoyed some slight relief in November after prices rose at a slower pace compared to the previous month. Data from the Philippine Statistics Authority or PSA showed that inflation eased for the second straight month to 4.1% in November. This was much slower than the 4.9% clip seen in October and was within the 4 to 4.8% range forecast by the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. This is also slightly slower than what analysts predicted in a Business World poll, which yielded a median estimate of 4.4% for November inflation. Average inflation for the year stands at 6.2%, far outside the government's target range of 2% to 4%. The Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas attributes the slower November inflation to lower prices of vegetables and fuel products, coupled with the strengthening of the Philippine peso. The BSP, however, said upward price pressures might come from price hikes in electricity, LPG, toll rates, and agricultural products. Can government meet its growth and inflation targets this year? Let's discuss that further on today's agenda.
Leonardo Lanzona Jr. is an economics professor at the Ateneo de Manila University. He holds a doctorate in economics, which he earned from the University of the Philippines. Lanzona teaches various courses like price and allocation theory and advanced microeconomic theory.
Ronilo Balbieran is the Vice President of the Research, Education, and Institutional Development, also known as the Reed Foundation. Given his expertise, Balbieran also teaches economics at the University of Asia and the Pacific.
Welcome back to Agenda. I'm Danie Laurel. Now joining us now is Professor Leonardo Lanzona Jr. and economist Ronilo Balbieran. Good morning, Profs.
Good morning.
Good morning, Danie.
Medyo mahirap to para namang dalawang economists na kakausapin over the same topic, no? But let's do our best. Baka syempre magkakaiba kayo ng forecast dyan. But what we can say is the 4.1% inflation in November, lower than everyone possibly expected, and a relief, of course, to consumers like us. But the question here is does this signal a downward trend? Hopefully, is that already it after 20 months? It's the lowest, or is this just a one-off na nangyari in November, possibly? Give us your thoughts on that. How much legs does this slower consumer price increases have? Let's kick off with Prof. Balbieran.
Hopefully this signals a positive environment for our economy. No? So some say it might be a signal for a slowing economy because we have less purchasing power. But I'd like to believe with the external forces. Just last night, there are some news outside of the Philippines that the price environment is really getting better. No? So and so therefore we expect that the other central banks are going to consider decreasing their policy rates. So in the Philippines, now we hope that this adds to the confidence of our policymakers not to consider really planning for the rate decrease already, as we need those additional boosts to increase the economic growth of our country.
Okay, I'll get back to you on the interest rates there. But I'm keeping those thoughts in my notes. Prof. Lanzona, let's about that inflation print in November, 4.1%. Are these indications to you that some supply side issues have now been resolved? Like natulungan na ba yung agriculture sector to bring down prices? Have you seen concrete issues here being resolved, especially when it comes to food inflation?
Well, actually, it seems that for certain commodities, medyo the supply side constraints have been, in a way, resolved. No? But if you look at rice, it still has a very high price. Perhaps maybe had there been no higher than expected harvest in the previous season, maybe it could have even gone higher. So I don't think it has something to do with the supply side. No?
Okay.
I think the reason why we have a lower inflation, it's mainly because of the interest rate policy of the BSP.
Okay.
So the idea is that the economy has slowed down. because of this policy, and therefore we're experiencing it's not really so much of a relief because with the slowing down of the economy, opportunities for greater income might actually
Okay.
be limited right now. And in fact, we saw this in the third quarter. There was a deceleration in consumption. Private investments have also had decelerated. In fact, there was a contraction in the gross domestic capital formation. So a lot of the growth is really coming from the public sector. So I would think that this thing is transitory in nature because I think we haven't really addressed the supply side constraint. I'm sorry, I'm taking an
I
opposite
know,
view.
that's a
As they
bit
say,
depressing.
In economics, there are always another hand. There's always an
Oh
opposite.
no!
So
Hindi
that's
pala,
ba- that's
hindi pala
basically what you're
bumababa
getting
yung
right
presyo.
now,
Oh,
Danie.
people are just not spending. Oh no. I mean, this is of course something that we need to clarify to our viewers, diba? In fact, there are economists saying that you still have upside risks, which are specifically rice and oil. Give us how
Yes.
much of a risk are you still, and why is the rice issue still an issue? You know, with all this importation that we've been going, and like you mentioned, hopefully harvest season, but then meron na namang El Nino looming.
Yeah.
How much pain should we be bracing for our highest commodity, especially for the poorest of the poor that need rice? Prof. Balbieran.
I think the only problem is rice. No? So for the oil, with the continuing threat on the slowdown of the global economy, no, we don't see much of an upside risk for inflation
Okay.
coming from oil.
Okay.
So it's really about rice and the management of the imports of rice and the logistics. Actually, it's really the logistics of rice
Okay.
that is actually a structural problem for our food prices. No? So that has to be solved as soon as possible. But of course, we've been trying to solve it for 100 years. No?
Hindi pa rin.
Hopefully with digitalization and with hopefully the signing of the Internet Transactions Act, we can move the power of the e-commerce towards agriculture trade, and therefore that can lessen the middle steps in relation to the logistics of price, and that can bring down some number of pesos per kilo for our rice prices.
Oo nga, because if it's structural, it could be addressed, diba? Okay, let's, Prof. Lanzona, you mentioned that it's consumption slowing, but anecdotally, when you go to the streets and, people are still shopping in the malls and the traffic is crazier than ever, where do you see consumption slowing? What indications are you looking at to tell us that, no, Filipinos are not spending? And is this a November thing or December? Iba na naman, and people are back na naman burning holes in their pockets as they start shopping.
Of course, it's different in the urban areas. No? So a lot of people are receiving remittances. So a lot of much of the money is really coming from OFWs. And so I think that's what you're seeing.
Okay.
But if you look at the whole country, I think maybe for some regions, I think consumption is really, and as I said, the data has actually shown that there's some deceleration. And as you mentioned, there's this El Nino effect, which has not yet been fully been felt this year, and I would think that it's going to be more significant next year. So we really need. It's not just a logistic problem, in other words, because of these weather conditions that are affecting us. And at the same time, we haven't really recovered much as far as from the pandemic. So you see a lot of small retailers that have closed down. They haven't recovered yet. So there seems to be a lot of imperfect markets. Some retailers controlling prices and so on. So it's a much bigger problem than the usual problems that we faced before the pandemic.
Interesting. So, can you nuance that, no? During the pandemic, we actually saw an increase in savings of Filipinos. What's the situation now? We're basically at least 2 years post-pandemic in other countries. Here we had this revenge spending fueling parts of the economy, at least this year in the first quarter, diba? It was quite a surprise. Tapos na ba the revenge spending? And now the savings are starting to lessen. And what's it going to be like next year?
Well, everything tapos na. So all this pent-up demand has already been spent. And therefore, we would expect more, actually lesser savings right now. So unless there's some real program from the government that would improve productivity, improve the quality of jobs. I think the problem of consumption is still going to be there until next year.
Okay, Prof. Balbieran, some are saying it would be beating the odds to have the 6%, 6 to 7% growth this year. But then we have a track record of beating the odds now, especially when it comes to growth. Your thoughts on that? You still think that the consumption is going to bring us, possibly beat the odds and still bring us to that 6 to 7% in the fourth quarter? We'll need something like 7 point something percent, diba, to grow.
Yeah. Well, everybody was surprised with the third quarter result at 5.9. But some may argue that it's because of the slowdown of our imports. No, but credit to the government, true to their promise, they actually jacked up on government spending. So that's more than 20% of increase in our infrastructure spending in the third quarter. And if the government can sustain that kind of acceleration in their spending, especially with our infrastructure projects towards the fourth quarter, then we can expect that this will provide some degree of pump priming for our entire economy, and that will further fuel our employment numbers. The key here is employment numbers. So if we are able to sustain the third quarter net additional jobs to the fourth quarter, then we can actually hit more than 7% towards the fourth quarter, led by the government spending on infrastructure. And then actually, because of the third quarter signal of the government infrastructure, then the private sector construction actually recovered very much in the third quarter. And if this will continue to the fourth quarter, this public and the private construction will lead the way towards us being surprised again for the fourth quarter, 7.5%, and that will surprise everybody again. And all of a sudden, we will hit 6% of our GDP for the whole year of 2023.
Well, that would be great, no? But let's go back to your point. Does the government have money to spend? Given the interest rates that they also need to pay and the debt that's just looming.
Well, for the last 3 quarters, I think they have actually exceeded their targets in terms of tax collections, no? And then number 2, the only reason why we slowed down in the second quarter was because of negative growth in our infrastructure. So there was unspent, no? Kung kanina sabi mo may mga savings yung mga Filipinos last year, ngayon ang laki ng savings ng government. So there's underspending towards the first and second quarter of this year. So they don't need additional money for this additional infrastructure spending requirements for the fourth quarter. They only need to spend what has been budgeted.
Okay, so kaya pa. We still have money there, no? I wanted to ask I guess let's go now to the rate issue, no? Because you pointed that out earlier on. We're still at 6.5%. Is this the terminal rate given the still upside risks to inflation? Should the BSP start easing at this point, as we see other countries as well, like the Fed particularly starting to be a bit more dovish? Prof. Lanzona.
Well, from the way you look at it, I think, as I said, much of the decline in inflation is really due to the BSP interest rates.
Okay.
So I think it should continue, no? But of course, it doesn't really solve the problem. It just sort of quells the expectations. it actually, in a way, disciplines the government not to spend too much. Because the idea is that if you keep spending too much, you'll have to incur more and more debts.
Correct.
And interest rates are going to be very high. In fact, I've been telling Cito, I guess in one interview with you, Danie, also, that the government expenditure in the third quarter might actually be crowding out the private sector already.
Interesting.
So it's and a lot of these things, the effects on inflation could actually be lagged. So you might experience a higher inflation because of these government expenditures that have been done in the last quarter. And if we're going to continue for this quarter, it might actually be even greater. So I think there are a lot of things that we need to be concerned about because primarily we don't have much. I mean, the programs in terms of increasing productivity has not been made by the government. So.
But is there upside growth here because it's likely or hopefully that we will be going down in terms of interest rate, and like you mentioned, the private sector might start to have a bigger participation, at least in the loans and debt, to be able to fund their growth. How much upside is there? Because the World Bank, for instance, is still looking at below 6% in 2024. And the expectation is inflation will already become target, interest rates will already go down, 5.8% pa rin yung growth. What are we missing here, Prof?
I think it all depends on what happens. There's been a lot of government expenditure. So is it going to be productive? I think we're still waiting for that. So if indeed it was the right type of investments that were made, then the government doesn't even have to spend anymore, because the idea is that the private sector should begin to pick up. So
yes.
So I would think that there's still some glimmer of hope, assuming that the government did the right thing and then really allocated those resources into the right areas and the right investments. In that case, it could be sustainable. But that is a big if, because a lot of the investments, I think, went into infrastructure, which is, as we all know, the returns for that's not very. It's high in the long term, but in the medium term, it might.
So structural pa rin the challenge. Prof. Balbieran, do you want to add to that?
Well, the one that will really fuel additional growth for our country for 2024 will really be will be driven by our two things, construction and tourism. So because we're still just trying to open up our country for international tourists. So, and we've seen that more than double-digit growth rate in terms of our growth in the tourism sector, and that can be partnered with the growth in the construction. So, if you have the continuous signal from the government that they are really bent on spending the money that they have budgeted for infrastructure, the private sector construction is 3 times the size of the government infrastructure. And that can only be unlocked if government continues to spend. So, and if those two things, public and private construction, continue to spend, that's 17% of our GDP in terms of the spending side. So if you are able to catalyze that together with additional money from the tourism sector, then you can have more than 6% of growth in 2024. And that will also be facilitated by our 2 new laws that was signed yesterday, the Public-Private Partnership Code, together with the Maharlika investment. So if those are combined, then we can have higher hopes of attaining more than 6% of GDP by 2024.
All right. So we, I guess, generally agree, stop putting the pressure on consumption, especially with inflation. Let's put the pressure on the government for some structural change and bigger investments in fundamentally productive assets to spur employment. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time. Those were, of course, Professors Leonardo Lanzona Jr. and Economist Ronilo Balbieran.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan.
And that has been today's agenda. This has been Danie Laurel. We are One News, all sides, all the time.